Today, we are pulling back the curtain on one of the greatest contradictions in modern corporate life. We are taking a hard look at Amazon's core operating principle, this massive contradiction between the public trust they have actively cultivated for years and the dangerous reality of their internal data security.
The mission today is to dive deep into Amazon's alleged systematic failure to protect your data, revealing what internal documents call their dark secret. We're looking at how a company that built a brand on efficiency and reliability has handled your most sensitive information less carefully than they handle a box of light bulbs.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. We've synthesized sources revealing a pattern of failure. Internal voyeurs, data fragmentation so bad they couldn't map their own borders, third-party backdoors that led to massive leaks, and the unsettling truth about the devices sitting right inside your living room recording moments you thought were private.
Okay, let's unpack this opening contradiction immediately, because the gap between perception and reality here is, frankly, staggering. We are talking about Amazon at its zenith of public trust. Think back to 2018.
Right.
Following a comprehensive study by Georgetown University, Amazon was cited as the second most trusted institution in the United States.
Second only to the U.S. military.
Exactly, only behind the military.
That is an incredible and, a very unusual position for a commercial entity to hold. It speaks volumes about the consumer confidence they had built. Their brand was synonymous not just with convenience, but with efficiency and, implicitly, reliability. If you trust them to deliver your packages securely to your front door, why wouldn't you inherently trust them with the digital record of your purchasing life?
And they knew how to leverage that goodwill. Later that same year, in September 2018, Amazon's representative, Andrew DeVore, went before the U.S. Senate Commerce Committee to testify about data privacy.
A critical moment.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Congress was trying to legislate new digital privacy rules following massive scandals like Equifax and the implosion of Facebook's reputation after
Right.
Cambridge Analytica.
So the Senate was poised to write new regulations, and Amazon was there alongside all the giants, Apple, Google, Twitter, to lobby for a crucial message.
What?
That the industry had it handled, and therefore minimal legislative interference was needed. They were defending their autonomy on the grounds of this established public trust.
And DeVore's opening remarks were just steeped in that public image, essentially using their brand maxim as a shield. He quoted the core mission. Amazon's mission is to be Earth's most customer-centric company. He assured the senators, and by extension the public, that consumer trust was their highest priority and that their commitment to privacy and data security was inherently woven into everything they did. He explicitly said they design their products so it's easy for customers to understand when their data is being collected and control when it's shared.
And what's truly fascinating, and I mean deeply disturbing, is the absolute disconnect between this carefully constructed outward projection of corporate competence and the complete internal turmoil that was revealed in documents that surfaced later.
Yes.
While Amazon executives were assuring the Senate they had everything under control, the internal division responsible for keeping customer data safe, the information security staff for the retail operation, was in crisis.
And we need to pause here on that distinction. Why is it so critical that we separate the InfoSec staff for the retail operation from, say, the AWS cloud computing wing?
That is the core of the problem. AWS, Amazon Web Services, is their hugely profitable cloud division. AWS is, designed to be the digital gold standard, a high-security environment built to protect the sensitive data of major governments, banks, massive global corporations.
So it has to be secure.
It has to be. It has robust funding, specialized tools, and a high-security culture, because if AWS fails, the entire digital economy suffers.
So AWS is the fortress protecting other people's data.
Precisely. But the retail operation, the part that holds your personal purchase history, your address, your credit card numbers, your streaming habits, your Alexa data, that operated in a separate, dramatically under-resourced environment. The documents revealed this InfoSec team was suffering from frequent changes in leadership, was dangerously understaffed, and morale was reportedly in the basement.
The documents reveal a truly dark secret that just undercuts every single promise made to the Senate. The most damning quote from their own leaders was the internal warning of an inability to detect security incidents.
Think about the gravity of that. You have an executive telling the U.S. Senate that privacy is prioritized, essentially arguing, trust us, we have the best security.
Right.
Simultaneously, the very people tasked with securing the core retail data, which is the data you generate, were internally flagging that they literally couldn't detect if they were being breached in real time. It wasn't a matter of preventing a breach, it was a structural inability to even know it was happening.
Wow. That structural inability raises serious questions about funding and priority. If the most trusted commercial entity in the U.S. can't detect security incidents in its core business, it suggests a profound imbalance in resource allocation.
It does. It's just that the success and security surrounding AWS masked a severe internal failure in the foundation of the retail business. They weren't just understaffed. The retail security tools were archaic compared to the scale of data movement. When you have a company growing that fast with that much data, the security architecture has to be scalable and modern. Their internal warnings indicate it was neither.
So what does this internal, undeterred crisis mean for you? The person shopping on Amazon, watching Prime Video, and, talking to Alexa.
It sets the stakes incredibly high. Amazon holds a massive, metastasizing record of your life. We're talking about everything you search for, everything you buy, including potentially sensitive items like prescriptions or over-the-counter medications, what shows you watch, what you say to Alexa, and, crucially, who is at your front door via Ring.
It's everything.
It is. The sheer volume of this data empire, combined with the documented inability to detect threats, means that any security failure has profound implications for your identity, finances, and personal safety.
Let's move to the physical reality of this failure in part two, which is about the infrastructural mess that allowed this crisis to develop. We call this the data sprawl and insider threats.
This is foundational to understanding the vulnerability. The sources describe Amazon's data empire as so sprawling, fragmented, and critically promiscuously shared within the company.
Promiscuously shared.
Yes, that the security division couldn't even map or adequately defend its own borders.
That phrase, it tells a story of unchecked internal access. For the listener, what exactly does data sprawl look like in practice?
Well, imagine trying to secure a massive library, but instead of all the books being on catalog shelves in the main building, they're scattered in attics, basements, and random uncatalogued storage lockers all across the continent. That's what data sprawl means. The security team literally didn't know where all the sensitive customer data was physically residing in their infrastructure, making a proper defense or audit impossible.
So if the security team can't map where all the sensitive data resides, they can't protect it. And we see a tangible, terrifying example of this fragmentation involving financial data.
We do. To illustrate the severity of this sprawl, documents revealed that millions of customer credit card numbers had sat in the wrong internal network location for years.
For years.
For years. This wasn't a temporary glitch. This was a sustained architectural failure. And because of the fragmentation and lack of oversight, the security team was unable to definitively establish whether those millions of records had been unduly accessed or not.
The uncertainty is the most chilling part of that. They knew the data was misplaced, but they couldn't confirm if a breach was already history, which means millions of consumers were potentially exposed without even the company knowing the full scope.
It's the difference between knowing you left the front door unlocked and knowing you left the door unlocked 5 years ago and you have no record of who might have wandered in. It highlights a profound systemic failure, demonstrating that the InfoSec team was reacting to crises rather than proactively managing risk.
And this shows the structural failure. But the problem wasn't just fragmented data, it was fragmented trust in the employees who had access to that data, leading to massive internal misconduct and corruption, the insider threat.
Absolutely. The privilege of accessing customer data led directly to abuse, driven both by, curiosity and greed. We had a large population of low-level employees who had far greater access to internal systems than their roles required, and the auditing to catch misuse was clearly lacking.
Give us some of the specific examples of that internal abuse that the documents revealed.
On the more mundane but still massive violation side, we saw low-level employees using their data privileges to simply snoop on celebrity purchases.
So just voyeurism.
Pure voyeurism. Imagine logging into a system and looking up what the biggest names in Hollywood or sports are buying. It suggests a culture where privileged access was treated casually, without the necessary firewalls and auditing checks that protect customer anonymity.
That's a massive failure of internal culture and control. But far more serious than celebrity voyeurism was the sheer corruption affecting the marketplace itself, which impacts every consumer who relies on Amazon's trustworthiness.
Yes, this is where the money was made, illicitly. Employees were actively taking bribes, often large sums, to misuse their access. This corruption was leveraged to help shady third-party sellers sabotage competitors' businesses.
How does that sabotage work in practice? What are they actually doing?
The corrupt employee would use their internal access to, say, flag a competitor's successful product listing as infringing on intellectual property, or as being a prohibited item, or simply finding a vulnerability in their account and getting them suspended.
So they could just shut down a rival business.
Almost instantly. It could take down a legitimate, successful small business that relies entirely on Amazon for revenue. The briber would then move into the now open market space.
And that manipulation had a direct impact on the customer experience and safety. If the best competitors are sabotaged, who wins? The shady operators.
Exactly. The source material confirms this internal corruption led directly to two major consumer harms. First, doctoring the review system, making it impossible for customers to trust those ratings. And second, allowing the sale of knockoff or counterfeit products to unsuspecting customers.
Right, I've heard about this. The source confirms that Amazon has been caught selling counterfeit books, mimicking authentic editions, and the company has, historically, taken a very hands-off approach to what goes on in its bookstore, never checking the authenticity, much less the quality.
And that's the result. This cycle of corruption, bribes for sabotage, review doctoring, selling knockoffs demonstrates that lax internal data controls don't just compromise your privacy, they compromise the fundamental commercial integrity of the entire platform.
And this internal weakness provided the launchpad for a massive external data leak, one that was explicitly likened to the Cambridge Analytica scandal.
Right.
Here's where it gets really important to track how external actors exploit internal features. We're talking about the third-party backdoor.
This specific vulnerability centered around a program Amazon created to be helpful. It was designed to let legitimate marketplace sellers extract metrics related to their own business performance, things like sales data or regional popularity.
Seems reasonable enough.
On the surface, yes. However, because data was so promiscuously shared, this system became an open backdoor that allowed third-party developers to improperly amass massive quantities of Amazon customer data that had nothing to do with their specific sales.
And what was the ultimate exploit? Who was taking advantage of this backdoor?
Amazon eventually discovered that a sophisticated Chinese data firm had leveraged this loophole, harvesting millions of customer information records. This was not accidental. It was a deliberate, large-scale operation. So much so that the comparison drawn by internal security experts was specifically to Cambridge Analytica, a scheme known for massive illicit data harvesting and exploitation.
That is horrifying. You believe you are interacting with a trusted platform. You buy a product, you leave a review, but you find out that a metrics program intended for a seller can be used as a siphon by a foreign data firm to extract millions of records. It proves that Amazon lost control over its data the moment it allowed external partners access.
It's a classic case of convenience over security. When a company prioritizes easy integration and collaboration without creating stringent compartmentalized security boundaries, it turns a feature into a fundamental vulnerability. The company loses control over the data's ultimate destination, and the customer is the one who pays the price.
We've seen the internal mess, but that mess often reaches out into the places we think are safest, specifically the device sitting on our kitchen counter or in our bedroom. Let's talk about Alexa, the unblinking eye in the home.
Alexa is the perfect emblem of this data contradiction because it is marketed as a helpful assistant, yet it functions as a permanent auditory sensor in the most intimate spaces of our lives. It's a cloud-based voice service embedded ubiquitously in devices like the Echo, smart speakers, cars, and even third-party smart home components.
Let's review the basic functionality for the listener and address the core privacy concern we've all had since the first Echo device appeared. How much is it really listening?
The functionality relies on a wake word, typically Alexa. Amazon's official contention, which is their defense against constant surveillance claims, is that the devices only stream and record audio after that wake word has been detected. Before the wake word, they claim, the device is only listening locally for the acoustic signature of the wake word itself, and that audio is quickly discarded.
But to detect the wake word, it has to be continuously listening at some level, which fundamentally changes the definition of privacy. And once the wake word is triggered, what data does Amazon actually retain?
They retain digital recordings of the audio spoken after the wake word, and these recordings are stored in the cloud. The retention is explicit. The company uses these past voice recordings to continuously improve its future responses and its proprietary natural language processing algorithm.
So even if you delete them.
Well, while users technically can delete voice recordings associated with their accounts, the retention for AI improvement is central to their business model.
And these retained audio recordings are not private. meaning they are not shielded from external scrutiny.
Not at all. These digital audio recordings are legally defined as corporate data that is subject to demands from law enforcement and government agents via subpoenas or warrants. Amazon does publish some information about the warrants it receives, but the access mechanism is legally established. They hold the data, and they are compelled to release it when legally ordered.
We have several striking case examples of this. Let's start with the precedent set by the legal use in the 2018 New Hampshire murder trial.
In that case, the judge ruled that authorities could examine recordings from an Amazon Echo device recovered from the victim's home. The defense argued that the device was protected, but investigators believe the device, which belonged to the victim's boyfriend, might have captured audio of the murder or its aftermath.
And this solidified its status.
Exactly. It solidified the device's status not just as a piece of property, but as a potential passive witness in a criminal investigation. It set the precedent that the device and the data it captures is discoverable evidence.
But then there's a much more chilling detail that suggests Alexa isn't just passively waiting for the wake word or listening for typical commands. It suggests a more pervasive auditory monitoring system that goes beyond simple assistance.
Yes, this detail comes from the publicly available Chris Watts interrogation video. Watts was the subject of a high-profile murder investigation in 2018. During the interrogation, the detective directly mentioned to Watts that Alexas are trained to record distress.
Trained to record distress. That changes everything.
It fundamentally reframes the device. It implies that the system might be monitoring the environment for specific acoustic frequencies, decibels, or tonal patterns, like intense arguments, sudden loud noises, or screams, regardless of whether the wake word was used. This moves beyond convenience and into continuous surveillance for specific, non-command inputs that relate to personal safety and conflict.
It suggests a level of integrated surveillance that even the users don't grasp. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it means that what Amazon claims is only listening for a wake word may also be listening for moments of extreme distress, which are arguably the most private and sensitive moments occurring in a home.
And this raises a huge ethical and consent question. Do users truly understand and consent to a device that analyzes background conversation for distress signals, even if they never explicitly called for the assistant? It reframes the device from being an assistant to being a permanent, passive witness inside your home.
Moving on to straight-up privacy breaches, we have instances where the system failed or customer data was entirely misused. And the company's response was, well, troubling.
The first major alarming instance occurred in November 2018. Amazon mistakenly sent 1,700 voice recordings of an American couple to an unrelated European man.
The complete stranger.
The complete stranger. The recipient actually reported the anomaly to Amazon out of concern.
And how did Amazon handle that highly sensitive breach, which exposed 1,700 private moments to a stranger?
Initially poorly, which is often the telltale sign of a systemic issue. Amazon failed to notify the victim of the mistake until a German magazine contacted them and published a story about the incident.
So they only reacted after it became public.
Right. They only contacted the man whose recordings were sent to a stranger after public pressure. They deleted the recordings and offered him a free Prime membership and new Alexa devices as an apology, labeling it human error and calling it an isolated single case.
An isolated single case. But we know that wasn't the only time the system misfired with intimate data.
Correct. Earlier that same year, in May 2018, there was the Oregon incident. An Echo device recorded a family's private conversation and, crucially, sent it to one of their contacts without their knowledge or explicit instruction. This was a broadcast of private life.
How did Amazon explain a recording being sent to a contact without authorization? What was the failure mechanism there?
Amazon again dismissed it as an extremely rare occurrence. Their terrifying explanation was that the device interpreted background conversation as a sequence of commands.
Wait, what?
They hypothesized the device heard something that sounded like the wake word, then interpreted subsequent background chatter as the command to record, followed by the command to send the recording, and finally the selection of a specific recipient name spoken in the background.
That is a fundamental, terrifying failure of the natural language understanding, or NLU, system. Background noise being indistinguishable from a complex command sequence to record and broadcast your private life completely undermines the user's trust in the wake word system.
It illustrates that the NLU system, in its effort to be responsive, is prone to synthesizing full commands from unintended private background audio. And this lack of robust protection for something so fundamental has had serious financial and regulatory consequences for the company.
Let's talk about the regulatory cost. We have two very large, distinct fines that define how regulators are tackling this issue.
In 2021, Amazon received a record $888 million fine from the European Union over data violations. This massive penalty was levied specifically under GDPR, focusing on systemic consent failures for tracking and profiling users for targeted advertising. It targeted the breadth of Amazon's data operation and its failure to legally obtain valid consent from EU citizens for their tracking systems.
So the $888 million fine was about a systemic failure to secure consent for their profiling mechanism in general.
Exactly. It hit them on the structural foundation of their business model. But then in 2023, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, stepped in regarding children's privacy, which was a different, and you could argue more egregious, type of offense.
Ugh. Yes. Amazon paid the FTC a $25 million settlement for violating children's privacy under COPE, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. What specifically was the FTC charge?
The charge was twofold, and both parts are breaches of trust. First, Amazon was accused of keeping Alexa voice recordings and geolocation data for years, rather than the temporary retention they claimed. Second, and crucially, they were using that unlawfully retained data, specifically the children's voices, to develop and train its algorithms, despite assuring parents and users that they had the ability to delete this information.
So they were promising deletion, but secretly keeping the most valuable commodity data used to refine their AI models, which is an egregious breach of trust, particularly when it involves minors.
It shows a systemic prioritizing of algorithm development and business optimization over user privacy guarantees. These two fines, the massive GDPR fine and the very targeted CUPIA fine, demonstrate that regulators, both internationally and domestically, have identified the fundamental deception regarding Amazon's data management and deletion promises.
Now, let's get into the deep commercial and ethical consequences of this constant surveillance. We move to part 4, the sensitive inferences and commercialization of interaction data. This is where the privacy risk really meets the profit motive.
This is where we shift from accidental breaches to the deliberate monetization of intimacy. The data shows that Amazon and third parties actively collect smart speaker interaction data to infer user interests and then use those inferences for targeted advertising.
And the financial incentive for doing this is, well, it's staggering based on the source material. What does the research tell us about how much value advertisers place on this voice interaction data?
The research demonstrated that smart speaker interaction leads to significantly higher ad auction activity. It raises bids from third-party advertisers by as much as 30 times the average bid.
30 times.
30. This 30x increase illustrates the incredible, hyper-specific value advertisers place on the intimate context gleaned from voice interactions inside the home.
30 times more valuable. Advertisers are willing to pay that much more because the data inferred from your voice interactions is so much more valuable and specific than regular browsing history. It tells them not just what you're interested in, but maybe why you're interested in it.
Exactly. The sophistication of this inferred sensitivity is what's truly concerning. Voice recordings and their characteristics implicitly contain a massive amount of highly sensitive personal information that you never intentionally offered up.
When you say it infers sensitive data, what's the mechanism? Is it only listening for keywords, or is the AI analyzing the tone and speed of your speech?
It's both, but the sophistication comes from analyzing the nonverbal cues. The NLU analyzes keywords, sure, but the truly valuable insight comes from analyzing prosodic features, the tempo, the vocal tremor, sudden changes in pitch or inflection. An NLU trained to detect distress signals or mood swings can quickly infer anxiety, stress, or illness based purely on how you ask a question, even if the question itself is benign.
So what types of sensitive data can be inferred from analyzing the voice data itself?
The analysis can infer your biometric identity, unique personality traits, physical and mental health condition, sex, gender, moods and emotions, socioeconomic status, and even geographical origin based on accent analysis. Your manner of expression becomes a treasure trove of data points revealing intimate, often protected aspects of your life.
So if you ask Alexa for the symptoms of a rare disease, the device has just collected data points that can infer your physical health condition and potentially sell access to that profile information to an advertiser willing to pay 30 times the norm perhaps for a pharmaceutical product.
That's the commercial loop. And this extends beyond voice interaction into physical tracking via mobile apps, combining the digital profile with your real-world movements. There's a current class action lawsuit in California focusing on mobile tracking without explicit consent.
What does that lawsuit allege Amazon is doing with geolocation data provided by mobile apps?
The suit alleges that Amazon uses geolocation data to offer advertisers a comprehensive consumer profile, achieved by systematically combining information about your online activities, what you buy and search for, with your physical movements in the real world. They are tying your digital purchasing habits to your physical locations.
Why is that combination of data so incredibly dangerous from a privacy perspective, especially in today's climate?
Because that data, when mapped against their comprehensive profile, can reveal locations associated with deeply sensitive activities that people rely on keeping anonymous for their safety. This includes locations linked to reproductive health services, specialized medical care, religious worship, mental health treatment, addiction recovery centers, and temporary shelters, such as those for the homeless or domestic violence survivors.
If the suit's allegations are true, this means Amazon could theoretically sell the knowledge that you, as a profiled consumer, visited a specific fertility clinic or an addiction recovery center to an interested advertiser, simply by combining mobile app geolocation data with your consumer profile. That is the definition of dangerous inferred sensitivity.
It creates enormous vulnerability for at-risk populations. The ability to geofence and profile visitors to sensitive locations is one of the most serious ethical failures revealed in these sources.
Finally, in this section, we have to address the chilling development announced in June 2022, the ethical frontier of voice mimicry.
At the Amazon Remars conference, Amazon demonstrated a feature in development where Alexa could mimic a specific person's voice based on less than a minute of recorded audio. The example they used was a deceased grandmother reading The Wonderful Wizard of Oz to a child.
And while that example sounds, sentimental, the technology immediately raised serious ethical and security alarms globally.
It did. The concerns focused heavily on the profound lack of consent by the deceased individual, who obviously cannot retroactively authorize the use of their voice. But the far more immediate concern is the potential for criminal exploitation. This technology allows for the creation of deepfake audio that is functionally indistinguishable from the real person's voice, which could be used for advanced financial fraud, social engineering, or emotional manipulation.
The demonstration was immediately compared to the dystopian science fiction show Black Mirror, specifically the episode Be Right Back, where similar technology was used to functionally resurrect a deceased loved one using their digital footprint.
The implication is that not only is Amazon harvesting your voice print while you are alive to profile you, but they are developing the tools to functionally resurrect and use that voice without consent after you are gone. It opens up truly dark and unpredictable avenues for misuse by criminal entities. It fundamentally changes the relationship between a living person and their digital legacy.
We've covered internal chaos and intimate surveillance. Let's move to part 5. Broader security lapses and lessons learned, demonstrating that the threat isn't just inside Amazon's walls, but in the entire interconnected business ecosystem they rely on.
We saw this play out very recently, demonstrating that even if Amazon secures its fortress, the gatekeepers can still be breached. We have findings regarding a massive vendor security flaw incident in 2024. This involved a third-party vendor system that Amazon used to manage certain customer data, likely relating to payment processing or logistics.
So the listener is only as protected as the least secure vendor Amazon decides to work with. What was the scale of that failure from the external partner?
This breach led to the exposure of approximately 2.8 million records containing sensitive customer information, including names, physical addresses, and purchase histories. What's critical is the timeline. Amazon's internal systems remained nominally secure, but the failure of the external partner allowed the access. The vulnerability was outsourced.
And this incident has a modern twist that ties it directly to the most critical supply chain cyber attacks of recent years.
Yes. That exposed data later resurfaced on the dark web in November 2024, attributed to a threat actor named Name303s, who released 2.8 million lines of Amazon employee and customer data, along with data from 25 other major companies. The source material suggests this data is likely to have been taken, at least in part, from the 2023 MoveAt attack.
The MoveAt attack was a huge global software vulnerability that compromised data for hundreds of companies. So this means a single vendor vulnerability, the MoveAt software, can cascade through multiple major organizations, compromise an Amazon partner, and ultimately lead to your data ending up on the dark web years later.
That is the crucial lesson. Cybersecurity is not just an internal issue, but an ecosystem-wide challenge that requires comprehensive oversight and collaboration. The failure of a payment processing or logistics partner becomes Amazon's failure and ultimately your privacy compromise.
When we place these incidents and fines, the $888 million EU fine, the $25 million FTC fine, and the $2.8 million record vendor breach, in the context of the accelerating digital world, we see the monumental challenge facing regulators.
The scale of the Internet of Things, or IoT, is growing exponentially, creating millions of new data entry points every year. The number of IoT devices worldwide is expected to nearly triple from 9.7 billion in 2020 to over 29 billion by 2030. Every new smart speaker, smart refrigerator, or connected car integration is a new data pipeline, increasing the surface area for attack by 3 times.
And the regulations are struggling to keep pace with that geometric growth. While existing legislation governs data privacy, the sheer volume and velocity of data generated by these devices is proving to be an industry bottleneck.
This creates what we can call the consumer awareness gap. Most consumers generally operate under the assumption that the devices they buy are secure and that the company they buy them from is prioritizing security. This is particularly problematic because a study revealed that security features were identified as the most important attribute when consumers purchase a connected device.
So consumers desperately want security, they think they have it, but the reality, based on all these documented failures of fragmentation and external risk, is much different.
The flip side, however, is empowering. The research suggests consumers are willing to pay for products with better, demonstrably secure features. If deep dives like this raise consumer awareness and demand, it could force vendors to address these critical pain points and invest adequately in the retail security infrastructure, which has been historically neglected.
So let's summarize the strategic recommendations that emerge from the analysis of these breaches, lessons drawn for business leaders, but also a framework for our listener who is trying to figure out how to navigate this ecosystem.
The analysis highlighted 4 key areas for enhancing data resilience. These are non-negotiable standards if a massive company wants to handle sensitive information.
First, vendor management. We saw why this is so critical with the 2024 breach.
It is paramount. Organizations must require stringent security standards and regular, unannounced audits for all third-party partners. You need clear security protocols written into every contract, stipulating that the vendor's security is held to the same standard as your own internal team. The partner is no longer a separate entity, they are an extension of your risk profile.
Second, risk assessment.
Risk assessments need to be comprehensive, and critically, they must explicitly extend to third-party vendors. You cannot assume your partner's security is as robust as your own, and if they hold your customer data, they represent your risk. They must be continuously monitored, not just audited once a year.
Third, cybersecurity culture. This addresses the internal abuse we saw.
This is internal and organizational. You must foster enhanced cybersecurity awareness across all departments to empower employees as a vital first line of defense. When we look back at the internal corruption, the snooping employees taking bribes to sabotage competitors, that is a failure of culture, control, and governance. Employees must be trained to recognize threats and adhere to strict data handling policies backed by rigorous auditing.
And finally, incident planning.
Develop proactive, comprehensive incident response plans. This involves not just having a binder on the shelf, but conducting regular drills and simulations to test the effectiveness and speed of the plan. When data leaks happen, the speed and effectiveness of the response determine the scale of the financial, regulatory, and reputational damage. Amazon's initial failure to notify the victim in the voice recording leak incident is a textbook example of poor incident response.
The lessons drawn from Amazon's failures, the fragmentation, the corruption, the vendor flaws, are a blueprint for how massive data ecosystems can degrade into chaos when growth outpaces foundational security and integrity. We have spent this deep dive unpacking Amazon's dark secret. The truth that its vast, sprawling data empire was poorly mapped, internally compromised by voyeuristic and corrupt employees, and dangerously vulnerable through third-party backdoors and pervasive consumer devices like Alexa.
The key takeaway is the dual nature of Amazon's challenge. Internal fragmentation and demoralization in the retail InfoSec team, which warned of an inability to detect security incidents, combined with acute vulnerability via external partners and smart devices. These incidents confirm that security is truly an ecosystem-wide challenge.
We have learned that consumer assurances were undermined by actual internal warnings, while at the same time employees were using privileged access to spy on celebrity purchases and accept bribes to sabotage competitors. It was a simultaneous failure of structure and integrity.
And through Alexa, we are reminded that highly sensitive location data and voice interactions, even background conversations, are being stored, analyzed, and are accessible to law enforcement. Worse, regulatory actions in the US and EU show the company retained voice and geolocation data for years, using it to develop its algorithms, despite explicitly promising users they could delete it.
So let's leave you with one final thought to mull over. Connecting the intimate nature of the surveillance with the engine that fuels the entire operation, the fragmented, broken security system.
Consider this. Every single interaction you have with the smart device, every question, every casual conversation parsed by the NLU system is being processed not just for a functional answer or command execution. It is simultaneously being used to build an intimate profile capable of inferring your deepest secrets, your health, your moods, your socioeconomic status.
That intimate insight is then commercialized, being sold to the highest bidder in the form of a hyper-targeted ad auction that, according to the research, could raise the bid by as much as 30 times the average. That data is their highest value asset.
And this entire lucrative economy, valued at 30x your average profile, rests on information that Amazon explicitly assured you, the user, the consumer, you could delete at any time. This highest value data you create is currently flowing into an ecosystem that their own InfoSec staff warned was structurally unable to detect a security incident. The knowledge is gained, the data is used, and the system tasked with protecting it is compromised.
We hope this deep dive has given you the knowledge to navigate this complex data landscape with a clearer and perhaps more critical perspective. Thank you for joining us.
Always a pleasure.